Hello, welcome to SwitchedOn, Paul speaking, and this is the very first Fuze Friday. I'm going to be doing these videos every Friday. They're not going to be a tutorial series, at least not to begin with. I don't feel like I know Fuze well enough to be able to be any sort of authority on it, but it's going to be more like a learning journey as I sort of learn the language and start making some games, and I'll be showing you some coding, giving you a few tips along the way, but hopefully it's going to be something that you can all follow along, learn with if you pick up Fuze for yourself. Talking of which, stick around to the end of the video because there'll be some details of a giveaway. I've got a couple of copies of Fuze to give away, thanks to the guys over at Fuze. But first of all, I thought I'd just have a little bit of news from this week, because it's been quite a good week for users of Fuze, and that is that there was quite a big update that dropped on Tuesday, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday. Added a few things, added a few new functions in. One of the main things it's added is some updates to the image editor and map editor, specifically the map editor, where you can now name areas for collisions and that kind of thing, which would be really useful for going forward. If you're creating image maps and stuff for creating levels, you can now sort of name certain areas, which is really cool. The main thing that the update really added was a change to the sharing system, and it's sort of heading towards a more Mario Maker kind of way, where previously on Fuze you could only share projects with people you were friends with on your friends list. So that meant sort of seeking people out that had Fuze, getting them to add you as a friend, and then you could see their projects. Now you can, it's moved on a little step. It's still not sort of completely open that you can just see anyone's programs. You still need to sort of find a code, but if you go to the projects section here, there's a new option to download by ID, and I've got an ID here. I'll just quickly type it in. Now this is now downloaded. It's by a guy called Steve ZX81, quite a big Fuze user if you're on Fuze Arena or on the Discord. So I hope you don't mind me grabbing this, Steve. Just to show you really that you can grab someone's project if you've got a certain code, an ID, a bit like Mario Maker, as I say. And you can see the person's code. It brings over all their assets, and you can then run that code and play their games, which is really cool. I don't really know how to play this one, but there you go. This is something that Steve's made. As I say, he's quite a big user of Fuze, and has been getting on really well with it. So here we go, ZL and ZR to drop depth charges off of your ship at the top, and try and hit the subs and score the points. So really cool. Just a quick example there as we get sunk of what you can do with Fuze and the new sharing system. So that's really good. And it's going to be really helpful if, as the community grows and everybody starts sharing their projects, it's going to be a lot easier to do that now. So there's a quick update to Fuze at Nintendo Switch. But what we're going to be doing is trying to build a small, easy project over the next few weeks. At the moment, I've just sort of been spending the week sort of learning Fuze, testing some things out, practicing a few areas. And I must say, it is such a nice language to pick up. The help section in particular is absolutely incredible. The tutorials here, the help, and obviously you start with getting started, and it gives you the basic overview of what all the sections do. Then you've got these sort of more in-depth tutorials about, you can just follow them through. And we've got code examples, explanations. It really is an absolutely incredibly well put together series of documentation and help and information. And then at the end of the tutorials, you come to a game tutorial. So you've got, how many steps here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 tutorials, and you'll end up with a fully working game. I've not actually done the full tutorial, but I believe it ends up in a platforming game. But there you go. You can follow that through. By the time you've worked through these tutorials and the game tutorial, you will be well away. And then you've got the Fuze Arena, the website, which is really good. Loads of help on there, and the Discord channel as well. I'll link to all that in the description below. But it's really good. And then you've got keywords, a little bit more about how specific keywords work, operators, and a quick reference guide. So you can bring this up at any time when you're coding. It's also available on the Fuze website if you want to have like your iPad open like I do while I'm coding, and then Steve's sort of jumping in and out in Fuze. I will jump on the iPad and get the references that way. A few people have asked me about the look of Fuze as well. You've got the different styles, so you've got like more of a spectrum kind of style there. See, like the rainbow in the bottom corner, and you've got all these different sort of looks. So you know you can get something that's going to suit you. There's also a keyboard, different sort of keyboards as well. We'll get to the keyboards in a second actually, because I think they're the sort of the hidden gem of Fuze is this keyboard, as crazy as it is. So I quite like using the retro one. Reminds me of the Commodore 64. If you was a Spectrum fan, maybe you use the Spectrum style, but you have got different styles there, so that's really cool. So let's have a look at this week's progress on the project. This was the project that I had started. I'm going to go through this, probably not line by line as such, and explain everything. As I say, this isn't meant to be like a Fuze tutorial. If down the line I feel confident enough that I could pass some actual decent help on to people, I will do. If you look at the Fuze YouTube channel, Dave and Ben have done a great job of putting together some basic tutorials, basically taking the tutorials that are in Fuze and sort of putting them up on screen and explaining them in a lot more detail. Really entertaining. They do a great job. So, you know, I feel like at the moment it's a bit redundant if I do anything in the tutorial side of things. Check out what Ben and Dave have done. Again, I'll link to that below. But yeah, so it's basically going to be me. The first game I'm going to try and make is like a basic Space Invaders game. Quite boring, but you know, it's easy enough to code. There's not too much going on. And then when we can get that working, we can build on it. I've got a few ideas of a few sort of interesting wrinkles that I can add to the traditional Space Invaders game, just to see, or just to show you really how you can grow an idea from something very basic. So first thing I would say about any coding, especially if you're making a game, let's just shift that down a few lines while we talk about a few things. Get used to commenting. Now, you can comment anytime with 2 forward slashes like that. Anything you put, as you see, it's grayed out, will not be read. You know, can't break anything. It won't be read by the sort of assembler as it runs the program. So it's really useful for putting notes and stuff in there. So use that. And if you've got a block of code that you want to put notes around, you can use a star and a slash. And then anything you put between that will be served as a comment, which is really useful for, it's good for leaving comments generally, but also if you want to block out a load of code, if it's not working or you want to test something, put comment tags around your code like that if you want to test stuff without necessarily deleting it or cutting and pasting it. So if I've got any sort of tips or tutorials today, my first one is get used to commenting your work, and please do it because it's really helpful. As an aside to that, it sort of goes hand in hand, but use bookmarks. You can use bookmarks at any time in Fuze by clicking down on the right stick. So let's get to a place. I've added a bookmark here actually. You can see the little red mark to the left there on line 19. And if you right click on the right stick, you get a list of your bookmarks up. Obviously in a short little program like this that it is so far, not necessarily, but when your code gets to sort of hundreds and hundreds of lines and it's all tangled up and you don't know what's going on, it's good to bookmark your sections, because then you can just jump to them. As you see there, right stick and you can jump to them. You can add a new one as well by clicking the add new bookmark at the top. Actually, let's get to a line. Let's get to the controls here. So if I right click on the right stick, add code bookmark, give it a name. Now you may notice as well, so I'm using the on-screen keyboard. I have been doing a lot of the coding with a USB keyboard, which I really recommend. But one of the things while we've got the keyboard up, I absolutely love. Whoever made this keyboard at Fuze, tip my hat to you, because I just love the sound of the keys being pressed is absolutely perfect. And just the visual look of the keyboard and the way you use the left stick basically to move around the letters. And it's got this really subtle snapping. It's very well done. It's probably one of the nicest on-screen keyboards I've used in any program. And it just snaps to the letter really nicely. So whilst it isn't the most ideal way to do a lot of coding, and again, I really recommend a USB keyboard. They've done a great job with this little keyboard. But anyway, adding a code bookmark, we'll call it controls. and then you can see that it's added a little red flag to the left hand side on line 23 where we've got that control part, and it's added it to the list here. So we can jump to the end, or we can jump back to the control section. Really useful. So 2 things before you start using Fuze: get used to using comments, get used to using bookmarks. It will be a lifesaver as your projects grow. So let's have a look at this little program we've got here. I guess probably be a good idea to run it first. It's really not spectacular, so don't hold your breaths. It's really a basic start. This is sort of the culmination of a few days of practicing, getting used to what all the code does, and then starting to put some of it into practice in this sort of Space Invaders test. So we've got a ship at the bottom of the screen that we can move left and right with the Joy-Con, just using the left stick, and that's basically it. So as I said, it is a very basic start, but once you get these fundamentals down, you can build everything from there. So there is a couple of things going on. Obviously, as I say, left and right on the stick, but when you get to the edges of the screen, don't take it as a given that that the ship will automatically stop in your programs. You need to put some code in to detect where the edges of the screen are to stop it going any further. So we'll look at that in a second. And you also may have noticed the numbers in the top corner. Now, I thought I'd output that to the screen just to show you what happens when you move your left analog stick. And again, we'll have a look at how those controls work in a second. But if I just move the stick a tiny amount, you can just see the number. See it just growing very slightly. It's very hard to do, obviously, because it's ultra sensitive to sticks. But basically what's going on there is if you move the stick, or if you leave the stick central, there's a value applied to that stick of 0, which you can see in the top corner because I'm not touching anything. If I move it fully to the left, the value changes to -1. As you can see there, it's sort of minus 0.9999. But in effect, it's -1. If I move it all the way to the right, then that's a positive 1, so +1. You can see there, 0.99 again. It's never getting exactly to 1. Now, that's really important, but also it's really just to show you the analog values of that left stick. So as you move the left stick, or left and right, the values range between -1 through to +1, and all the sort of points in between. So it's very useful. If you're using a game that uses analog controls, then that's important. Obviously, this game just uses really sort of digital controls. You're either moving fully left or fully right. So I don't need those precise values. But I will show you what I mean when we look at the code. So press plus button, goes back to the code, auto saves, and we'll just start from the top. Obviously, got our comments here, just a little title just to show you the program. Then I've given each section a title. So line 4 here, setting up the screen. So we've got a variable, which is basically just a value that can hold other values. And we've called it screen. You can call it whatever you want. And we've given that a value of G width, which I assume stands for get width, and G height, which stands for get height. So that will get the current width and height of the screen. And there is a scale value here as well, which is just taking the X and Y value of the screen and dividing it by 270. I'm not 100% sure why that is at the moment. I've looked at some example code and people seem to be using it. I think it's to do with when you're docked and undocked. But I had some problems docking and undocking, which I still haven't sorted out yet. So you can ignore this for the most part. But screen there is getting the current value of the Switch screen. So whether you're looking on the telly and it's sort of 920 by 1080, or if you've got it on handheld, which is what I think 920 by 720, something like 980 by 720. Not sure, but that's what that's doing. So the next section on line 8, we're setting up the little player ship at the bottom of the screen. We're going to call it PL SPR, player sprite. Again, you can call it anything. Variables, you can just, there are certain words you can't call them that are needed to be used in the language, but basically you can call it anything. But again, like the commenting and the bookmarks, get used to giving your variables sensible names. Like I would know all the way through the code, spr is short for player sprite. So anywhere I need to use that, it makes sense. If I'd called that yellow or something, or I don't know, shoe, it doesn't really make sense when I need to use it later. So try and name your variables that make sense. So all this is doing is saying you want to create a sprite. So you want to make a graphic in the game, and we're going to call that graphic player spr or plus spr. Then we're going to load an image in from the Media Studio. I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to delete this. and show you how to do this. But basically, we're going to call the image pl image, and again, makes sense. It's the player image, so we're calling it pl image. Now, when you want to bring an image in from the media library, on your keyboard you've got this media tab. Now when you're using a USB keyboard, all the function keys along the top are used for this sort of thing. I believe media is F2, I think, but there's a full guide in the tutorial anyway of what keys do what. So when you want to load an image, if you know the path to it already, you can just type it in, or you can press this media button and search for media, basically. Again, I think there's over 10,000 bits of graphics and sound and music and backgrounds and all sorts of amazing stuff. And this is what really sells Fuze to me, is that I'm rubbish at like graphic design, so the fact that someone else has done all that hard work makes it a hell of a lot easier to be, when you've got these game ideas. In the past, when I was sort of programming, I'd have game ideas, but I knew that eventually I'd never be able to make them because I can't make graphics. But knowing that there's 10,000 assets out there that I can use in my games means I'm confident that when I get an idea that I'll probably be able to follow it through. So really big selling point of Fuze for me. But anyway, so we're looking for media. I'm searching for ship because I want a spaceship. And it's going to bring up all the ships that it can find in the asset library from different people. So there's actually some galleons here and boats. But here are the sort of spaceships. You see there's all different types. 2D ones, 3D models, ships and boats. There'll be some 3D models of spaceships further down here. Lifeboat there, cruise ship. If you're making your 3D games, some really nice looking 3D spaceships. Some alien enemies that are going to come in handy later. But absolutely brilliant stuff. Really, really impressive. So I'm going to load in the ship that I was using, which I believe was this one, ship 3. So you can bring it up on the screen to have a look at it. Or you can press Y there, you see, to paste it into your code. Now if you press Y, it's going to stick the link to the asset in the library, and you just close it off with a bracket. And there you go. That will load in our image, and it will be called pl image. So anyway, we need to use that in the code. Again, we know pl image is our ship image. So what we do now is we take that image and we add it to the sprite we created. So we're basically saying that the sprite that we created, the player model that's going to be used by the, it's going to be moved by the player, the ship that's going to be moved, is going to use the image that we've just loaded into player image, and that's what line 11 does. So we're just basically applying the image that we loaded, that little blue ship, onto the sprite that will be used and moved by the player. We then scale it, so it's basically just to get it to a small size, because if you load it in the same size that it comes out of the library, it's huge. So a little bit of maths needed there just to work that out. Took a little while to do that. And then finally we just position it on the screen. So we're just giving a position variable. We've called it player pos. Again, makes sense. And we're positioning it so half the size of the screen X. So the width of the screen, we've halved it in 2, divided it by 2, which should put it in the middle. And we're saying put it at the bottom of the screen minus 50 pixels. So we're using the value of screen Y, which will be 1080, I guess, on the monitor I'm using here. Taking 50 off to account for the height of the ship, and it puts it somewhere down by the bottom. Again, a lot of these things are trial and error, so you can put a figure in here. So, for example, if we put in 450 and run that, oh, okay, the ship's too high. Let's go back. Right, let's try 250. Run that again. Okay, it's getting closer to the bottom. We're nearly there. Let's try it at 50. And there we go. It's at the bottom, about where we want it. So it's a lot of coding. And you see how quick it is just to get into your programs as well. It's literally a press on the plus button or clicking on run on the keyboard here, or F5 on a USB keyboard, and you're straight into your program. So there you go. So as you can see, different colors of text here. This blue text, this light blue color, means it's a function of Fuze. So that's been created by Fuze to do something. So it's expecting values in brackets after it that are called arguments. But we'll get more into that. As I say, this isn't meant to be a tutorial. White text here is our own naming convention. So we've just named a variable basically called player pos. It's in white text. And as I say, we've assigned it this value here of X divided by 2 and Y minus 50 pixels. The last thing here, just some other variables that we've just added just for movement speed and velocity that we'll come to later. So the main loop is really important in Fuze. This is the thing that will run your program basically. So line 20, you can see it says loop, and line 45, you can see it says repeat. Now again, I've put bookmarks to these because it's really helpful to know where your program starts and ends. And I've also commented there with main loop before line 20 and end main loop before the repeat there. What this is basically saying is anything between line 20 and line 45 is going to be repeated 60 times a second. Fuze runs at 60 frames per second. If you're not sure how frames per second work, if you just hear the terminology when you're playing your games and get all frustrated and pent up when a game runs at 30 frames a second and not 60 and you're venting away on Twitter, frames per second is basically what it says. It's how many times the game loop will run in a second. 60 times this program will run an update to the screen if it's called for that, which it is on line 42. There's an update there, which we'll get to in a second. So basically anything between your main loop, indent it like I've done as well. So loop and repeat are tight against the left-hand side there, and then anything inside it, you just tab across, and it keeps it nice and neat. You know that everything here is inside your main loop. So everything in here is running 60 times a second, which gives you your motion. So you see here the first thing we've got is a clear. That will clear the screen. If you didn't do that, when that ship moves it on the bottom, you will see like a trail left behind. Sort of every frame that, as it's moving, every frame that gets updated would get left on the screen, and it would just get covered. In fact, I can easily show you that. If we bring the keyboard up and we comment that line out, run the program. As you can see here along the bottom, as you run, every time, sort of 60 times a second, that code is being updated to the screen. It's leaving a copy of itself behind because we're not clearing the screen. And these are little animation tricks that you don't necessarily realise are going on in the background of when you're playing games. So that's what clear does. So if we comment the comment out, if that makes sense, uncomment the line, make it easier, won't it? And run that again, you can see as the screen is being cleared so quickly, 60 times a second, cleared so quickly that you can't see it to sort of the naked eye necessarily, unless you've got a specifically flickering graphic, which would probably give you an epileptic fit. But the screen is being cleared 60 times a second, and as you move that ship, the screen is clear for each new frame of the animation. So that's basically what that's doing. Really important to have a clear there anyway. Now we've got this section here where we're setting up our controls. Very easy again in Fuze to do controls. Basically, we're creating a variable here. We're calling it C, but you could call it anything you want. You know, JC, joystick, Joy-Con, player control, whatever you want to call it. We'll just call it C. Makes it easier, nice and short, because you use it a lot. You don't want to be doing loads of typing. And then we're just saying that's equal to, so any controls, and you see this is a keyword here in blue, so this is a Fuze function that handles all the controls. And the number in brackets is the number of the controller we want to detect. So 0, most things in computer programming start at 0. Most counting starts at 0. And the first controller here, and it will be the most common one, the default one that you're using, especially if you're making a one-player game, you'll be using controller 0. So we're just saying anything to do with the controls, any buttons that are pressed, joysticks that are moved, put them into this variable C that we can use later. Now you can see here I'm printing to the screen the value of C, and it's the LX is the left stick. So that's the left stick value. RX would be the right stick value. And it's really simple, the conventions in Fuze. If you want to detect if the A button's being pressed, you would do C.A. If the ZR, it would do BC.ZR. So easy. Once you've assigned controls to a variable, you can so easily detect them. So as you can see, as I said, printing that out in the top left-hand corner, you don't have to do that. I just wanted to show you, if I comment that out, you can see that's gone now from the top left-hand corner. And probably leave that commented out, but I was just wanted to show you that really. So the next line here is a little bit of detection, a little bit of an if-then statement. And we're saying if the controller, so C, LX, the left stick, and that value that you were seeing up in the top left hand corner, if that value is greater than 0, then do something. So as I showed you earlier on, that value when you push right on the left stick goes above 0. So this will all be true, and we're basically saying the player position, a value that we defined on line 13 above, the X value of player position, so the sort of horizontal left and right value, add the value of move speed, which is here. We set this earlier on line 16.5. So basically, as long as the person is holding down the left stick to the right, add 5 onto the player's position. Now again, can show you something really easily about how easy it is to change things in programming. Generally, obviously at this level, it can get very complicated. So if I just show you here, if we change that value to 25, run the program again, all of a sudden we're moving much faster. So again, this would be trial and error of how fast you want your ship to move. I found 5. Maybe a little bit too slow actually, but you know, kind of Space Invader-ish movement speed. But you can easily change that and it affects your program further down. So variables like that are great to use in your programs. Yeah, so we're adding 5 to the move speed. And then this line here, line 28, is what I was talking about as well earlier about getting to the edges of the screen. It's basically saying if the player position in X, so if the horizontal plane is greater than or equals to, so if it's bigger than the edge of the screen, so this is the screen value, and the X is the obviously the horizontal plane again, minus 50 pixels, so we're allowing a little bit of a buffer at the end so we don't go right tight to the edge of the screen. So if the player position that you're moving on the X plane is greater than the width of the screen less 50 pixels, then the player position is equal to the width of the screen minus 50 pixels. And that basically means that every time, even if you hold down right and you're right at the edge of the screen, the code will add 5 to your position and then immediately detect that your position value is greater than the width of the screen, so it will basically stick you back to the width of the screen minus 50 pixels. A little bit of a complicated thing to get your head around if you're just starting coding, but mainly it's good to look at these if-then statements. So if you're not comfortable with an if-then statement, you're saying if, and then this thing, whatever your condition is, then do this thing, and then we'll say at the end if, because then we're just saying, right, that's all the statement we want to check. And then same here, movement code that does the left movement. So if your left stick on the controller is less than 0, then minus the move speed from your player position, and then it will make the move to the left. And then a similar command here, if the player position is less than or equal to 50, so again giving ourselves a 50 pixel buffer on the left hand side, then the player position on that horizontal plane equals 50, and then end in that check. So there you go. So that's all the controls. So just, you know, I've spread it out a little bit, but basically looking at what, 10 lines there, and that moves your ship left and right. It's as easy as that. Really simple stuff in Fuze. And then finally, at the end, we're going to draw all of this to the screen. We're going to set the sprite location. So basically where the player ship appears on the screen, we want to set the player sprite. So that's the little ship that we've loaded into that sprite value. And then we want to display it at this position. And that player position is affected, as we just explained, by the controller value. So if the controller is moving left or right, then that player position is going to alter. And then that value will be used here to put that graphic on the screen. And then update is separate really to anything to do with the sprites, but basically update will be normally used at the end of your main loop, and that just basically says everything that you've done above, update it and put it all to the screen. So mainly this is used for text. If you want to display text on the screen, basically this update statement will push all of that onto the screen for the user to view. Then we get to this repeat, and it does it again. So it will go back up to line 20. And again, this is in, you know, at the blink of an eye. It will clear the screen, check for the controls again, see if the player's moving, update the player position, update the sprites, draw it all to the screen, and then back up and do it all again 60 times in a second. So that basically is our program so far. Hope a lot of that made sense, trying to explain it as easy as I can. Obviously, if you're au fait with programming, then a lot of this is kind of basic. If you've never done any programming before, a lot of that may have sounded like mumbo jumbo. Very hard to get a middle ground. Please let me know in the comments below. Either way, really, if you're an experienced coder, what sort of languages are you coding in, and have you picked up Fuze, and how do you find it compared to other languages? And by the same token, if you're completely new to programming, was all that mumbo jumbo, or did some of it make sense? And are you sort of tempted to grab Fuze and start playing around with it? Because that's what programming is. I started programming when I was like 11. Really basic stuff, and you literally just have to think, oh, I wonder what this code does, and then you get it to do something, and then you think, oh, okay, it does that, but what if I changed it to this? Run your program again, and you know, if that worked, great. If it didn't work, then you know not to do it in future. Obviously, that's a rudimentary level. You've got the tutorials and stuff in Fuze as well to give you a little bit more detail. Just to show you as well, you can bring up that help section at any time while you're in your code here. So yeah, that's really useful. So help is available all times. As I say, you get this exact same layer on your iPad. If you want to do it, you can print it out, I suppose, if you've got a ream of paper. Keep it handy. So there you go. That is the start of our little Space Invaders program. We're going to be doing a lot more coding in the week. Next week will probably be a lot more to see on screen. It should be less sort of talking about Fuze itself as we get used to it, and more about what we're doing. Please drop me any ideas below as well. If you've got any ideas you want to see me implement into the program, then I can have a look at that. If you've got any questions about Fuze, let me know. But as I say, please check out the description for more information on Fuze Arena and the Discord. Those guys know far more than I do. So hit those up for information. And also the giveaway. Please check the description for news of a giveaway. I've got one North American copy, one European copy, eShop versions of Fuze for Switch to give away. Basically, if you head over to my Twitter account, all the information's there. But check the description below for more details on that. I'm going to run that, probably announce the winners on next Friday's video, would make sense. So you've got a week to enter that and win yourself a copy. So best of luck. But I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. I appreciate this sort of thing isn't going to be for everybody. But hopefully you can get some enjoyment out of it. I just want to say as well, the sort of response I had to last week's video was absolutely amazing. So many people dropping me comments, and it just really surprised me sort of that there's such a big audience for this sort of thing. And so I just really hope I can sort of help bring it to a few more people, and that we can get the community growing and get sort of creating lots of interesting games and stuff. Okay, thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you for next week's Fuze Friday. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.